Just like lessons before, after World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union became two superpowers that were fighting almost all the time. We're going to start with containment. The word containment means to keep something harmful from spreading out. The United States used this word because they wanted to keep communism from spreading out of the Soviet Union. Like we studied before, after World War II, Europe was divided into four parts. The eastern part of Europe was governed by the Soviet Union, and the western part was governed by United States, France, and Great Britain. Germany has been split into zones after the war. The Soviets controlled East Germany, the French, British, and Americans controlled West Germany. Berlin, the capital of Germany, was split in a similar way, but the city itself laid 110 miles inside East Germany. Well, we have seen this man before. He is the main character of communism and the leader of the Soviet Union. He would be a protagonist in our Berlin airlift. On June 23, 1948, the Soviets tried to cut off the west access to Berlin. They set up a blockade. No vehicles could pass through the West Berlin. Britain and the United States were worried that the Soviet Union would take over West Berlin. Apart from blocking the roads, the Soviet Union had the electric power plant and took off the electricity in Western Berlin. The idea of the Soviet Union, with the lack of supplies and starvation, would lead the United States to abandon Western Berlin. But they had another thing coming. Truman, as President of the United States, had three options. Or either he abandoned Western Berlin, or either go to war, or he had the other thing. Okay, what was the other thing? He created the Berlin airlift. Truman's idea of the Berlin airlift was to carry to the western part of Berlin 4,000 tons of food and gas per day. Many of the United States allies thought it was a crazy idea. They would have to make 1,300 flights per day. But Great Britain thought that they would be capable of doing it. Who was the only superpower that could do 1,300 flights a day? Well, the United States. It had the capacity, it had the pilots, and it had the airplanes. On June 26, 1948, the Allied powers made their first flight to the western part of Berlin. Remember that Berlin was located in the eastern part of Germany, where the Soviet Union had control. Even though they made the flight, the Soviet Union was under tail. The sad part of the Berlin airlift is that for the first 2 weeks, they could only make 1,000 tons a day. 1,000 tons a day was not the idea of the Berlin airlift. Imagine just doing that amount and also keeping the pressure of the Soviet Union on their back. The Berlin airlift survived by General William Turner. This general was hired by the United States because he was a strategic man. He made an amount of changes that would help the United States meet their goal in West Berlin. His first strategy was time. The airplane should fly in and fly out in 3 minutes. His second strategy is that flights will be stacked up at 5 heights so that there could be a maximum amount of planes. His third strategy was that the crew only had 30 minutes to download whatever the plane had. He also changed mechanics, old pilots to new ones, old war planes into new C-54 planes, and the last thing he did, he hired people from Berlin to work with the United States. With Turner's new plan, the United States allies got to the goal of 4,500 tons, and mostly they exceeded and made 6,000 tons a day. For what Stalin and his brilliant plan of a blockade gave him a pat in the back. Eastern Berlin couldn't work without the Western Berlin supplies. Ha, take that, Stalin. Even though the Berlin airlift kept the people of West Berlin supplied for nearly a year, during that time both sides built up their troop strength in Germany. Tensions rose and stayed high. On May 12, 1949, Stalin decided to take out the blockade. Supposedly, the road would never close again until the Berlin Wall. But that is another story. See you on the next lesson.